Hello, class receiving students and teachers. You may be seated. Now, class and receiving students, before we go to our lesson for today, we will be having a look at our experiment on transportation and deposition. Receiving students, if you have done them, I'd like you to have them on your tables or your desk so we can go through the end result of that experiment. Class, I'd like you to have a look at your experiment that you did on transportation and deposition of sediments. Now, in your groups, I'd like you to discuss quickly, after you observe the result of that experiment, I want you to discuss quickly and tell me what you can see in the tray that you have of that experiment. I'll give you time to discuss quickly as a group, carefully, and see the formation of the sediment that you have there. I'd like you to have a closer look at the sediments now you have left from that transportation and deposition. You see what you can tell me. Here, this should be the part where you pour the water, the mixture that represented sediments, and the cardboard that represented river, you poured it down. Now this is the sediment now settled. So I'd like you to have a look at it and then discuss quickly. Someone come up with your result and let me know. A good look at it. That's a side where your cardboard that represented river was placed when you poured that mixture that represented sediments. So you have a look at it closely. If you look closely, you will see there is difference in these sediments. So take note of it, and I'd like you to discuss quickly and tell me what you can see there. Let me see what you have. Okay, look closely at your sediment. That's the settled sediment from that experiment you did. So you just look closely. Where can you find those large particles? Where can you find the sand and the soil? And then talk about it quickly. That should be enough time for you to discuss about that experiment on transportation and deposition of sediments. Now, I'd like someone from the class to tell me what you can see as a result of that experiment that we did on transportation and deposition that you can see in the tray that you have. If I can have someone from the class and receiving students, if you have done the experiment, you can also take this time to tell your teacher what you can see there in whatever you have used, whether it's a tray or a bowl or whatever container that you have used. Let's have Jennifer, please, if you can tell us the formation of your sediments in the tray that you have.
In our tray, the smaller stones are beneath the larger stones in the sedimentation.
Okay, good, thank you. What about Tanabik? What can you tell us of yours?
We have sand at the bottom, then small gravels, large stones, and mud on top.
Okay, good, thank you. Now, let's have a look at what this we have. Now, if you look closely, receiving students and the class, if you look closely, you will see in this experiment that we did, if you have a good look at what I have, that experiment you will see the large particles or the stones settled first. And where they are, you will see the sand around it. Then we have the soil. If you can recall, you mix large particles like pebbles, gravel, sand, and also soil. So if you look at this tray, you will see you have the large particles there. Then you have sand around here and soil. Now that is how it is like when sediments settle in the ocean beds or at the bottom of lakes. The largest sediments, they settle first. Then we have the sand and the smallest particles, which are the soil, they settle last. Now this is because because the particles are very small, it takes time for them to settle, so they are always, they settle last, and you will always find them where the water is not running, a still water or still environment. You will always find mud, which settles further in the lake, in the bottom of the lake than the larger ones. Now, soil experiment on transportation and deposition, the results says the largest sediments or gravel settle first, then the smallest last. That's sand, then soil. Now, our lesson for today is on fossils. Fossils. I'd like the class and the receiving students, you can tell your teacher and the class to probably discuss quickly of what you know of fossils, or what are fossils. Thank you. We have Shane.
Remains of dead plants and animals which have turned into rock.
Very good. Thank you, Shane, for your answer. And I hope receiving students, you have also given a similar answer like that to that question. And that's our question. You have been already asked. You discussed about that. Shane came up with the answer to that. Now, fossils, like Shane has said, are preserved remains or impression or traces of past life on Earth, meaning whatever happened or the life that was on Earth millions of years ago that we do not know, fossils help us to find out what type of animals, plants lived on Earth before us millions of years ago. If you can have that definition written quickly, class and the receiving students. Now, I'd like us to have a look at some pictures of fossils that were formed millions of years ago. As I've said earlier in the lesson, fossils actually show us the type of plants and animals that lived on the Earth before us. We have one picture that shows us of this shell or shellfish that lived 7 million years ago. Receiving students, especially those from the coastal areas, I believe you have some shells like that to this day. You can try to compare. When you are looking at the pictures, try to compare of that animal or that insect or plant that lived millions of years ago to what you may have around the environment where you live. We have another which is an insect, and that insect lived 119 million years ago. Have a look at it. Think about it. You could discuss quickly among yourselves whether that insect resembles one of the insects that we have today. The next we have is about 405 million years. Okay, we have another which is about 119 million years ago that fish lived. Look at it, especially those of you from the coast are receiving students, and probably those in the highlands. You may have some fish that look like this fish that lived 119 million years ago. Now I'd like us to look back at that shellfish. Those from the coastal schools are receiving students. If you can quickly tell your teacher whether you have some shellfish in your area that look like this shellfish that lived 7 million years ago. How about the the model class? Just talk among yourselves. Maybe those from the coast you can share with the ones from the highlands. Okay, let's look quickly once again at that insect. Let's have Tulanga. What do you think that insect that represents, or say, does it look like one of the insects that we have today?
It's a cricket.
Come on again.
Cricket.
Cricket. Okay, that's what Tulanga says. Thank you. There could be others, but this insect, it lived 119 million years ago. We also have that probably a fish, 405 million years. Carl, if you can tell us what you think that fish could be.
Probably it's a stingray.
Stingray, okay. Maybe there are other fish, students from the coast, that you have that look like this fish here. We also have another fish there. Let's have Brendan, you are from the highlands. What can you tell us about the fish there?
Tilapia.
Okay, Brendan says it looks like tilapia. Thank you. Now those are just some samples of fossils. Students in the receiving schools, you live in an environment where you have rocks, a lot of rocks. You have hills, you have mountains, bush, so you should be able to find some fossils and maybe bring that along to school to show to your teacher so you can discuss further on the different types of fossils. Now fossils, there are 4 different types of fossils. We have one which forms as petrified fossils, and these are bones, shells, or parts of ancient living things, living things from many years ago that are replaced by minerals from the surrounding rocks. Have the copy quickly. Now, another type of fossil forms as carbonized fossils. Sorry, there's a picture of a petrified fossil. That is how it looks like, and that is a picture of a petrified wood. Carbonized fossils, these are dead living things, that are trapped due to extreme heat and pressure over millions of years. The materials in these living things are burnt except the carbon. Another type of fossil comes in the form of molds and casts. This is a picture of a carbonized fossil of an ancient fan. And we have another that comes in the form of molds and casts. Now, molds and casts are remains of living things that are trapped in sediments decay. We have already learned about sediments and how sedimentation takes place. So this is where remains of living things, they get trapped. And molds are the exact shape of the original living thing. Whether it's a shellfish or fish, it has the exact shape of that original living thing. Now we may have, this is a shell, and this shell is the remain of a living thing which was a shellfish. And this shell, it remains in the sediments. We have learned the sediments, they come in layers. When the first lot of sediments are eroded, they settle on this shell. Then some more sediments are brought in by the river that erodes them, and they come on top of each other. So we have sediments after sediments. And once this happens, there are some of these sediments that get trapped in the shell. Example. So, say this plasticine may be our sediment. So as this empty shell that was once a living thing, a shellfish, once only the shell is left, we may have the sediment that settles and some more sediments come on top of it. As that happens, this sediment is pressed further down, firmly down. And as it happens, it takes the shape of this shell, and that is the mold. Now, as minerals seep into the molds, they harden, okay? While it's there, the minerals, they seep in and they harden this sediment that is in the mold. And we have copy of the original living thing that is called the cast. Now we also have another type of fossil that is unaltered. Unaltered meaning it's not changed. Whatever the fossil or remains of that living thing is unchanged. Probably some parts of it is changed, some doesn't. And these are dead living things which are preserved very quickly with little or no decay. And if you have a look at a picture, you will see that's a body of a human. It's about 5,000, it should be 5,300 years old. And it was discovered, preserved, not much decayed, done to that body. And that is actually what happens to some living things, animals and plants. Now, our activity for this lesson, receiving teachers, there are two activities. We will be only doing the first activity, and the second activity, teachers, you can do that second activity as an accessible task. because the second activity takes a longer time. And so I've left that second activity for you to give it to your students as an accessible task. And we will be only doing the first activity. And I'd like us to look at or go through the instructions for the activity before you can get your materials. Now we have the first one where it says you are to cover the desk with newspapers, old newspapers. You are to form a slab with the plasticine or clay. Receiving students, you can use clay if you don't have plasticine. Now, you are to brush the object with some cooking oil. That is alternative. You can do without cooking oil. Then you press the object firmly into the clay or plasticine until the whole of the object has made an impression in the clay or plasticine. Carefully remove the object from the clay or plasticine. Observe carefully what happened and record your findings. Now, if I can have the runners to come and get your materials. Now, I've put some shells there, but class, you have been asked to bring other things with you, other remains of living things with you. And if you have done that, I would also like you to use them besides the shells that are provided for you. Okay, you should be starting now with your activity. Discuss together as you work through the activity. You are to remove the plastic. See what you are doing. You're not listening to instructions. Get the plastic out. That shouldn't take you long to do this activity. This activity shouldn't take you long. You should get it done quickly. Have your results written. You have your what day. So that's where you write your results. Have your results written here. Have you removed the plastics from those plasticines? Hey, you're supposed to remove it, not put it down like that. Why are we all sitting like this? Can't we give hand to get this one done? Look at it. Get one. Don't just sit down. Step. Look up there. That's a step. You have yours there. See? Three carefully together. And two of you what? Slab is like that shape you have. That's a slab. If your what remains of the living thing is small, you can use that one already. If it's big, then you put two together and do that. That may be too clean. Put two together and try it. We don't have enough, so you can put two together or three together and try it out. Try to bring it out and then you see what you can see. Okay, you see. She did the back of this. So this is the impression of this shell. This is a mold. Okay. Once mineral water seeps in and fills this up, and then it forms rock. And there is erosion, then the shell may be eroded away, Now let's see what you have. You're actually making molds of the remains of living things that you have. Now I'd like Helen from group 1, if she can tell us what herself and her friends have come up with.
Okay, this is the shell that I used, this, and the result is this, the mold of it. So I think out in the nature, it will be something like the shell will be placed in a rock like this, and then when the minerals come, like seep in, it erodes the shell away and leaving the end result of it. Thanks.
Now what we had is, that was from Helen and her friends. What about the other groups? Can we have one more from the class? We receiving students, I hope you are also doing the same. How about Tulanga? What can you tell us about what you and your friends did?
I used this shell, and I came up with the shape of the shell I used, which is this one.
Okay, thank you. The shape of the shell. Thank you. Thank you, Tulanga. Now, class and receiving students, what Tulanga is saying when he says the shape of the shell is actually impression. It's called impression. So when we looked at the definition earlier, it said preserved remains or impressions. So that is what Tulanga is actually meaning when he says the shape of the shell. Now, our summary, most fossils can be found in rocks and are evidence of past life on Earth. Two fossils may be found petrified, carbonized as molds and casts, or preserved unaltered. Most fossils are formed from the bones or shells of animals. The last summary point, living things that live in or near water have a greater chance of being fossilized when they die. Now, this is because when living things that live on the land, when they die, they are decomposed, or decomposers and scavengers that we learned about earlier in this year in one of our lessons. They consume or they eat some parts of these living things. So they are not able to get fossilized. Melin, if you can give us a key phrase for this lesson.
Fossils.
Fossils. Okay, let's see what I have. Past evidence in rocks. As we know, most fossils are formed or found in rocks. Our next lesson is the Earth's atmosphere, and teachers, take note of the materials that you are to have. If you're not able to provide them all yourself, get the students to bring them along with them for the next lesson. And with that, thank you, class, and the receiving students for your participation.